What up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today podcast, the podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 146 of the podcast, and in this episode, I have a very special treat for you. I sit down and chop it up with the one and only Steven Rodriguez, aka Chef Papi. He is the creator of the famous Dominican pizza, which has been featured in many events all over the country and around the world. He's also known for tons of other amazing dishes like his longaniza mac and cheese and a Philly cheesesteak whose cheese pull caught the eye of the popular Instagram page Devour Power, which ultimately landed him at a Food Network event. Listen in so you can hear all about that journey and about his upbringing, his influences, his experiences, and learn about the work ethic that has gotten him to this point and the life lessons he has learned along the way. This was a really fun and insightful episode for me to record, and I am eager to share it with you folks. So I'm going to keep this intro as short as possible, but I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight and mention a few things, a few takeaways from the episode. So aside from all the stuff that I mentioned, there's also a lot of stories related to work ethic and dedication and putting in the work to chase down your dreams, which is something that those of you that are listeners of the podcast know that I'm big on. So that's something that definitely resonated with me. We wind up speaking about parenting and our mutual experiences with that. Although Chef Papi is married with 3 kids, my wife and I have 1 son and have our hands full with him. So I can't even wrap my head around the concept of having 3 kids. So kudos to him. And I also know that in having kids, that's like an extra gear of motivation that you have as a parent. And going after your dreams is that much more important when you have children, especially doing it responsibly, because you want to one day be in a position to allow your kids to be in a position to chase down their dreams, just like our parents put us in a better position that they were in to allow us to do what it is that we want to do. To me, generation after generation, doing less and less of the grueling, I hate my job type of work, and more of, I can't believe I get to do what I love type of work should be the goal. But again, realistically and responsibly. So it's not to say that it's cool to be a 35-year-old with no job that's 5'0" and has aspirations of being in the NBA. There's a very big difference between that and responsibly providing for your family while you also put in the extra work that it takes to go after your dreams. Another important takeaway for me that we speak about is some of Chef Papi's successes as well as his failures, which I think is key and very important to hear because you don't have the successes without the failures. It's good and important to have the balls to shoot your shot, but also be ready to not score every single time. We touch on the type of mentality that some folks have, which is that of wanting instant gratification and believing in overnight successes and thinking that people that you see that are successful around you, you just see the success part, but not all the years of hard work and failures that come before that success. There's also towards the very end of the episode an amazing story that Chef Papi shares with us. It's a story that I think is so good, so inspirational, so touching, so motivating that I want to tell you guys about it right now and spoil it, but I won't. So stick to the end so you guys can hear that. And then I'll reflect on it a bit in the outro. And lastly, before we get into the interview, not really interview, it's a conversation, it's a free-flowing conversation. So I don't really like to label them as interviews. But before we get into it, you guys know what I mean. I have another treat for you, which is that this episode has video footage. You can find footage of the video on the Spun Today YouTube channel, which I will link to in the episode notes. And I hope you guys enjoy. Now, there's good news and bad news about the video footage. The good news is that it exists and you guys can check it out. And I will ultimately chop it down from the full interview to smaller, more digestible clips that I'll share also on the YouTube channel and on the Spun Today Instagram page. So it's definitely a plus. But the bad news with the video is that I recorded it with my DSLR camera. And when recording video with the DSLR camera, it records in half-hour intervals, which means that every half hour you're supposed to pause and reset the camera and start recording again for another half hour. But instead of stopping at the half-hour mark, since I was so into the conversation, which I guess is ultimately a good thing, I didn't pause until about the 45 minute mark. So although you will be able to hear the entire interview, there's about a 15-minute chunk in the middle that does not have the video footage. So that's definitely my bad. But as a way to make amends with you, the folks that will be checking out the video, instead of giving you a blank screen within that 15-minute window, I dropped in some pictures of us during the interview, as well as a bunch of photos of some of Chef Papi's signature dishes, like the Dominican pizza and Dominican sushi, mofongo de camarone, and a bunch of other good stuff. So it's not a bad trade-off, right? And last but not least, I want to give a very special shout out and thank you to Aura, which hosted this episode of the Spun Today podcast. Stephen and Elaine, I appreciate you guys very much for that. Elo, thanks for opening up and sticking around and allowing us to record. And without further ado, folks, here is a very quick way that you can help support the show if you so choose, and then we'll be jumping right into the interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. Another great way for you to help support the show and also take care of your foundational health is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on my affiliate link for Athletic Greens, aka AG1. One scoop of AG1 in your water helps to fill nutrient gaps, promote gut health, and support whole body vitality. Just one serving delivers a comprehensive blend of 9 products: a multivitamin, minerals, prebiotics, probiotics, adaptogens, and more, all of which work together for the strongest foundation for better health. I personally take AG1 and really appreciate the peace of mind of knowing that my foundational health bases are covered, even when I know I'm not eating as healthily as I should be. Also, by using my affiliate link at spuntoday.com/support, you will get 1 free year of vitamin D3, as well as 5 AG1 travel packs, absolutely for free. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support and click on the banner for AG1. All right, folks, we have a treat today on the Spun Today podcast. Chef Steven Rodriguez, aka Chef Papi, aka the creator, designer of the delicious, famous Dominican pizza, which I want to get into, by the way, the origins of a little bit later. But first off, just want to say thank you. Appreciate you doing this.
I'm happy to be here, man. I can talk, so
Nice.
I'm in my waters.
Awesome. So, like I was telling you before, I wanted to have you on primarily because, like, I follow you on Instagram. I've had your food a bunch of times. Like, oh, delicious. Home run every time.
Thank you.
And something that I could tell from, at least from the outside looking in, I can see, like, the passion that you put into, like, what you do. And, like, there's, like, creativity to it also. Like, I like mac and cheese, and I know there's a specific video, the, like, longaniza mac and cheese.
Yeah.
Every time I see that video, bro, I'm like, ay, coño. Like, my mouth waters. Like, it's awesome. And, like, I appreciate that type of passion. Like, whenever somebody puts passion into anything that it is that they're into, like, it, like, draws me to that. And that's why I wanted to have you on, hear a little bit about your story, how you got started, what got you into cooking, like, your influences, like, the whole 9.
Wow. So, I kind of, so I'm Dominican, and I come from a very Dominican family that was very, very reserved. Like, they would go to church every Sunday. They were like, we were like on lockdown growing up. You know what I'm saying? Like, these, like, my parents are the type of people, like, they would watch the 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news, and, ay, mira lo que pasó.
No se puede salir.
Exacto.
Yeah.
So
My parents
it was like, you know, the world was like, it was like, dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
So
You were born here or in DR?
I was actually born here. I was born in
Cool.
Queens, but I'm like very Dominican. Like, you know, I would go to DR like every year as a kid,
Yeah.
like summer vacation. My mom is from Jarabacoa, so we would spend most of our time there. And
Where's your pops from, if you don't mind me asking?
he's from un campo de San Jose de la Mata. Like,
Okay.
he's just like really, they're just really, you know, that real. They're like not city people. At all, you know what I'm saying?
That's
So,
how my mom's from Bonao, a campo from Bonao, and my father's from Campo de Moca. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
so our people, you know, they come from a very special place, which is very beautiful. The best memories of my childhood is literally just spending time in Jarabacoa, and you know, we would visit my grandmother like elsewhere. You know, we had family like basically everywhere, and I grew up in like I remember like we were gonna have chicken for lunch, and I remember like watching my grandfather like grab a chicken by the neck and like, yo, this is the one we're eating, you know. So like I grew up on that real criollo Dominican stuff flavor, you know, and all my uncles, they all had like bodegas and stuff here, like. So I grew up in that ambiance, you know. My dad had a restaurant when I was like in high school, and that was like really when it all started for me. Like that, on my drive here, actually, I drove right in front of that place, which is so weird because the GPS never takes me here through there, and I drove right in front of that place, La Flor de Paraíso. It's on Myrtle and Cornelia.
Nice.
That used to belong to my dad like over 15 years ago. And that's where I like learned. That's where I made my first mofongo. You know what I'm saying? That's where I learned how to like make my first like anything. And I was just always my parents have always been very very hospitable people. Like they love entertaining. They we've always had like huge barbecues at my house growing up and stuff. So like just making people feel comfortable has always been like me. Regardless what I've done before, actually like just not giving a shit about what people think about me and actually just becoming a chef and, you know, living life on my own dime. Like it wasn't until like I let go of that and just really started doing this that I learned that I was like, you know, I'm just being myself. I'm just, you know, me being a chef, I'm just being me. I'm just literally doing what I enjoy doing. You know, I love people. I love watching people eat and drink and feel good and enjoy what they're consuming and talk about it. Wow, this shit's amazing. That shit makes me feel good. So
it must be like empowering, kind of also, right? Like
it's just more like reassuring. Like, you know, a lot of people, you know, they either do stuff or they don't do stuff according to like how confident they are.
True.
And, you know, the only way for you to actually build like self-confidence is to actually be confident.
True.
You know, and letting go of whatever fear it is that you have to just execute something, no matter how many times you fuck it up. Like the best things that I do, I've learned by like, by
failing a lot.
Exactly. So
Sure.
I mean, it's the only way to actually become confident in something is to actually just go through the process. You know, people are afraid of the process. They you know, this is everywhere you go, you hear people saying things like, "Oh, come to this seminar and you'll just be flipping houses in
overnight."
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, and you'll become a millionaire. Like people are like, "Oh yeah," and they do that and they go and they spend their money and. You know, there are people out there who are doing amazing things, and you know, but there are a lot of scammers out there.
Absolutely.
You know, and
there's probably more scammers than
of course, and the system is all like flooded with people who are just looking for a quick dollar, and they don't think about longevity, and they don't think about being happy. You know, doing what they do. So I'm just having fun, man.
For me, that's a rule of thumb, which is if something it comes along too easily, like it's usually not the right way to go.
Exactly.
Like the path, and it's not necessarily that you have to seek out, you know, the path that's hardest or anything like that. But I feel, for me personally, that I want to earn whatever I get. That I want to like go through a process. If I want to learn podcasting, I started over 5 years ago. figured out all nooks and crannies and been doing it consistently ever since. With writing, same thing. I put out a couple books and like I learned the craft. I like read and I listen to other writers and like I want to like dig into it, and I don't want to be like that overnight success that is not gonna know how to handle that success, because you figure that out, I believe, like through going through the stages and going through the process and the experience that you get from doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So.
and sometimes in the process, you might find an opportunity to take a shortcut, and you actually go for it. And whatever outcome comes out of that, it's still a lesson. Whether it worked out for you or
Exactly.
it didn't, and you're like, oh, you know, that came back and it stabbed me in the back or whatever.
Like a lesson
That's
of what not
part
to
of the
do or what to do.
process.
Exactly.
That's just you actually, you know, moving forward. You know, I don't believe in quitting. You know, I have 3 kids, and the one thing that I'm huge on is just like, no, like when they're like going through one of their like little tantrums that they can't figure something out, and then I'm like,
You gotta stick to it. You gotta
relax.
Yeah.
Look at it. No, I'm not just gonna do it. Look, you figure it out. You know, there's a lot that I didn't get, you know, because of the generational differences, you know,
True.
Between, you know, my parents, where they grew up and how they grew up and the way they raised me and like now the era was 2020, the era we live in, and then me having
Everything is
kids for
handed.
myself and
Yeah.
how different things are. Like, you know, when I was in high school, like it was like, yo, call me after 9 o'clock, bro, because you know
The minutes the minutes
know
are
what I'm
free
saying?
nights and weekends.
Exactly,
Hell
bro,
yeah.
get out of here. Like, I ain't paying for no text message, you know. So it's like, it was either that or like MySpace, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like very different now, you know. Like my kids, bro, they'll take my phone and then they'll FaceTime me. My 2-year-old knows how to FaceTime me,
Yeah.
bro. Like,
That's so scary, right?
yeah, it's
Mine is,
crazy.
my son is 1.5. A little more than 1.5. He's 19 months now, and he'll take the phone. Like he knows how to press the YouTube app. When there's a commercial, he knows how to press skip. And I'm like, yo. And they make these devices like so
They're
addictive.
gangster, bro.
That, yeah,
And you know
sick.
what's interesting about that? Do you know how, like, this, I read into the smallest things. Like, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old does not have 15 seconds of patience to watch a commercial before whatever they want to watch actually starts.
Wow.
That says a lot, right?
That's
About
nuts.
like the
Yeah.
way we live our lives. You know what I'm saying?
Everything's
like,
go. Like I want it
Yeah,
now.
you know?
Like you want instant gratification with like everything.
That's what I'm saying. People are afraid of the process, man.
Yeah.
You know, there's no like patience. There's no like critical thinking anymore. There's no questioning facts. You know, people just turn on the TV or they go on Facebook or whatever and they read the first thing that they see and they don't even finish reading it by the time they're like going around like
And telling
trying to
somebody
tell
else.
that story to someone else and they're fucking up that story, you know, and it's probably like a bullshit story
Exactly.
to start with, and it's just like Jesus Christ, people actually spend their time doing a lot of dumb shit, you know, like
Something that's telling that what you said, which I think speaks to our generation, like in terms of like responsibility, because we're like that bridge between our parents, which were probably like OD the other way and strict, they no salga de la casa.
de que no mami,
And the-
no se preocupe, eso está
Ajá.
bien, ya yo lo chequeé en Google.
But we're the bridge between them and then the new generation that it's like the exact opposite, that they want everything easy, everything now, and we're like the in between that we have to like try to like give them a little bit of our parents and but also let them be a little bit of them, you know what I mean, and kind of like find like a happy medium.
I just think
in
it's
between.
like a bunch of like just failed parenting that wasn't really necessarily their fault. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes
They didn't know any better.
Sometimes you want to like blame like your upbringing or whatever, but at the same time it's just like, you know, they're doing what they knew best. You know what I'm saying? They're living by their instincts, you know? Like they're
Absolutely.
trying to protect you or give you or set you up for whatever. I mean, there are a lot of shitty parents, but there are a lot of good parents
Yeah.
that failed at parenting because they just didn't know better. You know
True.
what I'm saying? And it's just like,
You gotta
it's-
cut them a break too.
yeah, you know, you gotta like just really just analyze things. Like, okay, why am I like this? You know, like what you know, and just like go to the root of it. And if you know if there's someone you need to have that conversation with, like, you know,
And work it
have
out
that
with them.
conversation and get on with your life. You know what
True.
I'm saying? Like, because time is running out. Look at Kobe Bryant, 41 years old, just when he's like beginning to like enjoy his life. He worked his ass off his entire life. Yeah. And then he just retired. Like he just retired. Come on. It hasn't been more than like how many years he retired?
Handful of years. I think 2016, 17
Yeah,
maybe?
he just retired, and it's like shit, man. Dude, when I saw that video of his helicopter going
spinning
down
around.
Dude, when I actually saw it go up in flames, dude, like I felt like someone kicked me in the chest, dude. Like that was honestly, and I've never like even been to a basketball game to actually see him play. Like I admired him for he was such a great person.
His like work ethic, dedication, stuff like that.
He was amazing, but like when he was 17 years old, I saw this video. He was 17 years old, like talking to some high school kids, and he was just like he's always been that amazing of a of a person. And I saw that video, dude, and that shit, my stomach hurt. My stomach hurt, bro.
The episode I did last week actually was dedicated strictly to Kobe because he was like my favorite player. I saw him play once when he was on his like final season, and I saw him play at the Barclays, and like I followed his career afterwards. He started like a company called, if anybody wants to listen to episode 145, like I really got into like the details of it. Okay. But he started a production company called Granity Studios. The goal was to teach children work ethic and discipline through sports. And he wanted to do that like mainly like for his daughters, and he was the coach of his daughter's basketball team, which is where they were on their way to his daughter's game that day on the helicopter. And he put out like 3 books, best-selling books that were aimed for children. He started a podcast called The Punies, like also like trying to like teach that. It was so sad. Steven actually was the one that called me. He was like, yo, did you hear the news about Kobe? Like when it happened? And bro, I was fucking heartbroken.
That was the worst.
So sad. But yeah, it speaks to, like you said, do what you need to do while you're here. Yeah. And have the conversations you need to have. And you don't want to look back on life and just have it like full of regret. Right?
Not at all, man. I mean, it's just not worth it. You just don't know when your time is, man. True. Like you just don't know.
So tell me more about, you said your dad's restaurant, that's when you first made the mofongo? Was that your first time cooking? Because that's a question
that was really when I actually I actually fell in love with like food.
Tell me, was it just the experience of like, how old were you when you used to go?
I mean, I was a freshman in high school, so...
Did you like work there after school?
Yeah. I would every day. Well, not every day, but on the weekends and like every Tuesday. I was like there like 3 or 4 days of the week, like consistently, and I was literally like I was never the type of person like, oh, this is my dad's restaurant, so I'm like the cara hediondo. Like nah, bro. Like dude, if I had to clean the bathroom, I would clean the bathroom. Yeah. I started like literally peeling plátanos with 2 Mexican guys. I remember their names, Raúl and the other guy was Roberto. Well, we would call him Beto.
Nice.
I still remember their names. I don't know where they are in the world. I still remember those guys. I learned how to like peel plátanos and yuca and season meat and clean shrimp and just prep basically everything. In the kitchen. And so then, like, eventually, so the way it worked was the kitchen was tiny. It was upstairs. And the prep area was downstairs in the basement. So whenever these guys needed anything, they would just yell, like, necesitamos plátano, or necesitamos whatever, camarones. Like, we had to, like, one of us would, like, go take it. And I started being the guy, like, whenever they would ask for, like, no, I got it. And I would always take the stuff upstairs to the kitchen because I just I love the scene in there. Like, whenever I would bring them something that they were missing, and it was, like, during rush hour, and they're, like, yelling at each other and cursing at each other, and flames going up in the air, and it's just plating stuff and ringing the bell and, like, get the shit out of here.
Like organized chaos, right?
Yeah, it was it was, I don't know what it was about that. I just loved it.
Nice.
So then every time I would make one of those runs, I would like help out the dishwasher a little bit, You know,
Like, do what
the
you can to try to stick around.
The dishwasher was the place was so small that the dishwasher had like his own like little stove, and the place used to sell so much rice and beans, bro, that they literally had like a huge pot of white rice and a huge pot of like yellow rice and a huge pot of moro and a huge pot of just beans going the whole day.
Damn.
So like they would like bring one down and you know bring it out to the front, and they would have to put another one to get through the day. Like that's how it was. It was so busy. It was one of the busiest restaurants ever, and so I was there, bro. You know what I'm saying? And I learned how to like you know make all that stuff. You know, and he also was like he had the little, I don't know what you call that, we call it salamancra, but it's like this little grill. You know when the Chinese people put the barbecue ribs and just a flame on top.
Yeah.
So he had to also
like
control
a
that
broiler.
The space was so small. Like he was just literally like they would just give him the hot plates with the fish or the steak or whatever that was going in there, and he would pop it in there and just watch it and give it to them at the temperature they needed it. Like so he was washing dishes, making all the rice and beans, and doing that. So like
multitasking,
you know,
like a
yeah. So I was like you know helping him out, and then eventually I moved like a little to the left, and there was the grill, and I like learned how to just grill all types of steaks and stuff. And then I moved a little like to the left, and I was like working on the line, like actually like sauteing shit, and you know, I just loved it, man.
That's awesome.
And I was like young, I was really young, and so you know, it was always something I really enjoyed.
That's awesome. And tell me, so you mentioned the mofongo before. Is that like one of your like go-to things or favorite things to make, or is it just like you remember like that being specifically like something that you just did like from scratch?
No, I'm just like remember specifically that I was like literally like if you want to go to the root, like that was where like I learned how to like peel a plátano. That's how I learned how to make tostones, how to like what is a mofongo, like how you know how what ingredients does it go with, like how do you smash it, why you know like just the why of like all these things. Like wow, this is cool. I didn't know that you had to go through this much trouble to prepare a meal, you know?
Sure. Yeah. That there was like so much detail underlying it.
Yeah, and there was like so many people behind it. Like, you know, you sit down at a restaurant and you order something and you have no idea. Like someone had to go pick this up somewhere, deliver it to you. You know, someone had to receive it. Someone had to store it properly. Someone had to clean it. They had to season it. They had to give it a little love. They had to put it away. You know, like when you order, you know, they have to do it right. The sauce has to be right. Like
all the prep that goes into it.
Everything. There's so much to like, you know, a chicken wing coming to your table as an appetizer that you know it's amazing.
And stuff like that is like lost sometimes now because we're like we were speaking about before, just the culture of getting everything like immediately, you know what I mean? And we don't like think about all those steps like beforehand that it takes for something for a dish to be like in front of you like that.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to it, you know. And I mean it doesn't really end there.
Where'd you go from there? What were your next steps from there, like in terms of like your trajectory to like being a chef?
So then after high school, I was actually, so like I said, I grew up in a family where it was like very reserved and stuff. So I tried to do everything that I possibly could just to get out of the house and do shit, you know? So I was actually like really into music, and I was like a bachatero, bro, like at a very young age. Like at that age, like also like working like at the restaurant and whatever. Like I was out like playing parties, like little gigs and stuff.
Nice.
Like
That's awesome.
Like all these little Dominican clubs. Like I was a Queens boy, so we were all over the place. You know how?
Do you remember Sidetracks or Amasura?
Yeah, of course.
Like places like that.
Loco, nosotros vimos en todos esos sitios. Jubilé.
Yeah.
Forget about it, loco.
A couple of my boys back in the day, they were into my boy Peter. He used to play guira in the band. My boy Noel used to play segunda. I was like, I never got into it, like in terms of like playing an instrument, but I would like go like to support them to like all their gigs and stuff like that.
Yeah, those are the best parties, man. You know,
because that was like the era of like I would do that. Yeah, the Blessed Sacrament parties. My aunt, that's by Etna and like Chestnut around there.
Yeah.
My aunt used to live like up the block from there.
So I was really into that. I was really into that scene, and like I did that for a very long time. Then like because my parents were very religious, like I would go to church every Sunday. I started playing in the centro in the Bronx. I don't know if you ever heard of the Centro Carismático in the Bronx. They used to do the young people retreats and stuff. So I did the music ministry there for like a year or two. So I was always like into music and stuff. And
was that tough, by the way? Like being into like you mentioning how your parents were like strict and stuff like that, being into music or being into cooking, is that something that they were like, hey,
no, not cooking.
That's not
cooking, because they just saw that as like that's hard work, you know.
Okay.
So like, but the music thing, yeah, like growing up, and the music thing was like always like,
muchacho está soñando,
I know el futuro y vaina, and it was
yeah,
just like so like, you know, that thinking, you know, that is just like I'm totally against, because that's bullshit.
True.
Because I know for a fact that if I just like only did music, I would seriously be doing something real.
True.
Like even if I'm like, let's say, just doing sound for someone or actually playing in like Romeo's band or something, I would still be enjoying my life like the same way that I'm
absolutely
enjoying it now,
and you'd be like in that world.
I would be doing what I love, you know what I'm saying? And that's the thing, that goes first. And if that goes for everyone, and no matter what situation they're in, like that goes first.
Like whatever it is that they're into.
If you're not happy, you can't make anyone else happy. That's it. That's the bottom line.
True.
I don't care who you are or what you like. That's if you have nothing to give, you can't give anyone shit.
True.
You know?
And it's important to know too, like there's not only like the front man of the band or like even the rest of the band. There's sound, there's engineers, mixers, a lot of people behind the scenes. The boom holding, you know, people holding the mics and the marketing, and you know, there's a machine behind every single band, anything that anybody's into, music wise, or you know, in any industry, movies are the same way. There's like hundreds of people, hundreds of different jobs that people could be into. You know, it's just not what you see.
And those are the things that people they just don't really care for.
Yeah.
Like.
And sometimes they don't know.
Like, who sits to watch all the credits after a movie is over?
And there's a shitload.
And even if you actually try to read it, most of them go so fast that you can't really like catch everyone.
Yeah.
Before your brain is able to process, like, you know what I'm saying? You're not sitting there like jotting these names down and like looking these people up to see who they are.
And like what does second grip mean? Like what is that?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But that's like a career.
And I'm sure that without that person, that movie would not. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like, so that's very interesting to me. Like I go deep with a lot of shit because.
And you find stuff like that out by, like we were saying before, like going through the process. Like you won't know what that job is unless you like try to be the front man of the band and find out that, you know, maybe that's not your thing, but then you find out that
maybe you're not that good, and that's the thing. It's either like I feel like our generation grew up with either two things. They either thought they were like fucking F9 on some shit, and like they just. No, you're not, and that hurt their ego so bad
that they just stop right there.
Yeah, that they just fucking no upward spiral. Just that's it. They just continue to live their life like a very mediocre life, and or it's either that or the people who just like had those parents who were just like embrace your kids' creativeness or their craziness. Like, ¿cuánta gente no se han pegado loco en Instagram haciendo video, like, you know, just being clowns, bro, like, and it's changed their life. The fucking Dominican pizza changed my life. It literally changed my life. Like, I wasn't doing what I was doing a year ago, and now it's all because of a fucking plátano. But I've been peeling plátanos for the past 15 years.
It started when you were like in high school.
Exactly.
With the two Mexican dudes.
This is what people think. Like they just like, oh, like this, you know, he's lucky. Like, bro, I only have 32,000 followers on Instagram. That's nothing. That's nothing.
That's a lot.
No,
to me, that's you know what I mean. But I know what you mean.
Nothing in the scale of like who do I look up to? Who you know, like
relatively speaking,
who's really doing this shit? You know what I'm saying? Like, dude, like I still gotta pay my bills, and I still think about it every time I spend money, and you know I do shit because it's like, yo, dude, I'm raising a family. You know, I have to make the right decisions, the correct investments.
Absolutely,
like, with my
it's
time,
not
you know
like just
saying?
about you. Like,
yeah,
so people
it's like,
you're responsible for.
Of course, you know, and so on the big scale, you know, of things, it's like, you know, I ain't shit, and I have the humility to understand that, but because I know what I want and I know where I'm going, you know, and I'm also very confident in that, and I'm a person that believes that if you believe that you are meant to be, in a certain place, or you can, or a certain type of person, or that you can accomplish something, that you can actually do it.
Absolutely.
If you go through the process.
And if you're willing to put in the work. And
of course. But that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Because you're in the process, and then oh shit, I got to do this myself. Yeah. You got to do it yourself. So if you do it, then you get to the other side, and then you continue the process, and you keep encountering these issues and these problems, and which is all just part of the growth and understanding. And it's like the people who are at the top, they're at the top because they've been through the process. No shortcuts, man.
And if you're not willing to put in that work, then it's not for you.
Yes, and a lot of people
that weeds a lot of people out.
A lot of people have grown up rich and had all these opportunities and have been given things, and they have destroyed them because they haven't gone through the process. It's not about what you have.
True.
It's about what you're willing to do. And the only thing that determines what you're actually gonna get out of bed for is how you feel inside. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's everything. Are you motivated or not?
Absolutely. There's speaking to that, there's a quote that I really like about somebody in that situation that's like born rich or that has everything handed to them, which is people like that are born on third base and they think that they hit a triple. You know what I mean? So they have that that like everything that comes with hitting a triple, that's but powerful. They didn't earn it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I definitely want to get to the Dominican pizza, but take me from.
So from high school, I was really into music. I did that for a while, and my dad had that restaurant for, I want to say maybe like 8 years or so, and maybe I was like in my early 20s. He sold it, and he bought this like little supermarket in Brooklyn, and I was helping him run the store for a little while, and eventually, he's like, he wants to retire and stuff. My dad is not like a young dad. Like, he had me, like, my brother's 8 years older than me. My sister's like 11 years older than me. Like, I'm the youngest.
Are you
of
the youngest?
three.
Okay.
So my dad, I think he's like probably like 70 already. So
my dad's 79 now. He had me like really late also.
Yeah. So, he's like, oh, we're retiring and stuff. And like, so I basically was like running that store for a while. And I got this idea of like, really, really like, I saw the need for people who like wanted food, Like, we had schools in the area, and like lunchtime was, we had like a little steam table, like a little steam table, like 6 feet, and like, and we would sell out of like rice and beans, and we were busy with the sandwiches, and it was small. We only had like one machine and blah blah, and it was like, I saw a lot of potential in the business to like really make this like
cater to that
food
that
spot. You know what I'm saying? So I did, and I was really into this show called Bar Rescue. I don't know if you ever saw it with John Taffer.
No, I haven't.
It was.
Is that the one that he goes into like a shitty bar and like fixes it up?
Yeah, like they were renovating in a couple days and trained the staff and blah blah. And they would really go to the root of the problems of like the families that were running it or whatever, and like why they were failing and all this stuff. And it was like mostly staged. But
have you ever seen The Prophet?
No, but
like it's like that type of show.
Yeah, it's the same thing basically.
Okay.
But this guy was like very straightforward. Like, this is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You're walking by this problem every day and you're ignoring it. This is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to hear it.
He hit the problem like head on.
So I was seeing all these like loopholes in management and like just the way that our parents spoke to people or how they felt it was like okay to address people, and like just like I just saw a lot of things that were just like this is wrong. This shouldn't be like this. Like, so I got a little leeway and a little like freedom to like run the business, and I made all the investments to like make this happen. So like we expanded the deli and with the steam table were like maybe like 3 times the size, and so I started tapping into catering. Like, I built an app, I built a website. Like, all of this costs a lot of money, obviously. But awesome. I built an app, I built a website. Like, I got on Uber Eats, I got on Grubhub. and like I was just catering to the people that I saw that were actually started coming in the store,
And you
like,
saw a need and you wanted to give the
so
solution
people
to
would
that.
ask like if we had like a juice, like fresh nut juices and like salads and stuff, and I'm like, no, but we will. Like I
Nice.
listened to the customer and I made it happen, and we started selling a bunch of salads and juice bars, and like I literally tripled the sales of the business.
Wow.
Like I figured oh wow, this is this is cool.
It worked.
Like, I
had an idea. I put it in play, and
I tried a lot of things before it actually got to that point, but I went through a whole process of like trying things that weren't working out, and I was like, oh, maybe this, maybe that, and then eventually I figured it out. By
do you remember any of those? Like something like which one of those things that you tried?
Yeah,
that
like for example, I got these huge chalkboards. I personalized this menu with really cool names, like for sandwiches and
So
stuff.
people were like, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah, and it was like, wow, like I must try this, and I put those chalkboards on the board on the wall, and I just figured that just because those chalkboards were there, people were just gonna come in and just order these things, and they weren't.
True.
So that was one of the things where I was just like, why isn't this working? Like,
you learn from it, and then all right, that didn't work. Let me try this.
Yeah, so it was like one of the simple things that a lot of people just like they would try something and and it wouldn't work, and they'll just call it a day. And like I was just never having that shit. Like, okay, this didn't work. Something has to work.
True.
Because if people go to Dunkin' Donuts every day and grab coffee, and no offense to anyone or Dunkin' Donuts, I just don't like their coffee. Like, I think it's trash.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would I spend fucking $3 on something that I just don't like?
True.
I spend $3.50 and go somewhere else, or spend 75 cents.
Get the cart coffee
and get that. Nah, bro, but son, those ox stores be having the coffee sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Or even those little Dominican stores in the Bronx for 75 cents or $1, you get the best coffee you've ever had. It's just like,
without the gimmick.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
The app and like that thing, do you still have that going on?
I don't. I was basically, the way that it was all organic. Like, I just saw the need for what people wanted, and I delivered it to them, and I proved to myself that I was capable of more. And I was really into branding, and I was like, you know what, like, I have to brand this because it's people, they're drawn to like brands. They're drawn to things that look, like they're put together nicely. So I was stuck, like, well, what am I going to name this business? And my wife at the time was like, well, my wife now, but at the time my wife was like, well, what do they call you at work? Like she was trying to help me figure out, like, what are we going to brand this thing? And I was like, they call me Papi, like, and the reason why it was because we're like in East New York. It was like most of our customers were black and Dominican.
The black was like, hey, Papi.
So that's what they called us. All black people call us the mommy and Papi. Good morning, mommy. Like, what's up, Papi? Yo, don't put too much mayo on my sandwich.
Is that the origins of Chef Papi?
Yes, well, exactly. So I was like, oh, that's the name. So she's like, that's it right there. So called it Papi's Grill. So that's what it was. And it was like a buzz. It really it was doing really well. And then from there I went to Caoba, and I never changed my Instagram name. It was like NYC Papi's because that was the name, Papi's Grill.
Oh, okay.
And I left it like that for a little while, and like when I was doing the tasting for Caoba, I had this dish that I had been working on for a while, which is a Dominican pizza. And actually, the first run was actually like a huge pie. Like, it was like a large pie.
Like a large pie. Yeah.
Yeah, like you could grab 8 huge ass slices out of it. And I just thought it was very like unattractive, and like it wasn't
practical.
It wasn't crunchy. Yeah, it was more like a mango flavor, and I didn't like it, and I just kept modifying it. And when I did their tasting, I was literally up the night before the entire night, just like perfecting everything that they were gonna have. Because it was pretty much like the way I wound up there was I heard that they were selling the place, and it turned out to be a complete rumor. But I met Steven, the owner, and we hit it off. And I told him about all my plans for the business, like what I would do if it were mine. And he was like, "Yo, let's why don't you just take over the kitchen and we'll see where it takes us." You know what I'm saying? Like, let's build
Nice.
this relationship. And at the time I was like, okay, like I didn't see anything wrong with that. I was like, okay, let me take the summer off. We'll start like in the fall, September, whatever, and I did this tasting for them. I was up the whole night before, just, perfecting everything. And I came up with this dish that I had been modifying it like the whole summer. And it was like an instant hit. Like everyone that tried it was like, yo, this is,
Off the hook.
I think you got something.
I can absolutely vouch for it.
And actually, funny story, before I actually opened the menu at Caoba, I had one of like my mentors like come in, Chef Kelvin. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I have. I actually saw him on. He was on a podcast recently, Earn Your Leisure podcast with those guys.
Yes.
I saw that episode. It was dope.
He's a very modest guy, but
Yeah.
he's A-Rod and JLo's personal chef.
Yeah.
He has a very long trajectory and a great reputation. And this guy, he was a mutual friend of one of my wife's family members. And I was like telling her like, yo, this guy, he's like, I love this guy. She's like, yo, I went to high school with that dude.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna go take him over. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And yo, they showed up there one day.
Wow.
And he tried, and I made the pizza for him, and he was like, yo, you really have something here.
That's awesome.
And that meant like so much to me.
I can
'cause
imagine,
it
bro.
gave
That's like so
me,
validating.
right before, probably 2 weeks before I actually started, like at Caoba, he gave me that little reassurance that I needed, and that meant a lot to me.
Because that's a big step too, in and of itself, right? Like you going from what you're doing before to like taking over a
because
kitchen.
it was two different worlds.
Yeah.
It was more like my thing was like catering, and I would cook in like large quantities, and it was like a lot of
For, like, the
lunch
masses.
food, and yeah, exactly. It was like a quick lunch spot. Like, yeah, we had really cool signature dishes and the cheesiest, amazing things and shit, but like it was different because everything was just like an a la carte menu. So I really had to like just like compress all my ideas,
Yeah.
and the flavors that I knew and the things that I was like used to working with, and just bringing them to like a more presentable life. And we had a great year. We had a great year at Caoba.
Absolutely.
It was. We had a lot of success there with the menu and stuff.
Tell me, before you actually, when did you get the idea for the Dominican pizza? Because like you said, you started first like with the large pie, but before you even tried that large pie, like were you just like chilling one day like Platanos pizza, let me mash them together.
Yeah, actually, I was just bored of the fact that like we were only making mofongos
Gotcha.
with plátanos, and I felt like that we could make more cooler shapes out of this thing and make it.
It's like a
food.
versatile
because
food,
I
right?
saw the how attracted people were to the food porn on Instagram. Like people would go nuts over cheese and shit that was like put together in a funny looking way.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, we gotta do more with this, and I started doing those little mofonguito cups, which obviously wasn't something that new, but the names that we gave our dishes were very hilarious. Like one day I was basically testing recipes, and one of the employees comes into the kitchen. He's like, "¿Y esa vaina qué?" and I was like, "That's it. That's the name, la vainita."
Nice.
And I was like, that became one of the dishes that like really put me on board. Like,
And what was that, la
neighborhood,
vainita?
like,
What was it?
it was like these little mofonguito cups, like we made them with steak or shrimp or chicken, but they were like really cheesy, and they had
Yeah.
like this like really good, like with the sauces that we put on them, like were made from scratch, and they were just delicious. And people were just like, wow, this is amazing. And it was like that thing,
Nice.
and then from there, just like, the pizza, it came out of like all these trials and errors of like, we have to, like, we gotta put plátanos on the map. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I go on Instagram, how come I don't really see like why Dominicans aren't really like on the map like that? Like with like, why not? Like, why isn't there a Latin Food Network yet? Like,
True.
there's so much, and I know someone who's like working on that, and I don't want to say much, but
True.
like, you have all my support. Like, but why isn't that? What? Like, come on, bro. Like,
Why we not there yet?
we should be there yet. You know what I mean? We should be there already. And because Latin food is amazing, bro.
Absolutely.
Like, dude, Cuban food and Peruvian food and Colombian food and Mexican food and
So many
Dominican food. Like, bro, we have good food.
so many
bro.
different flavors that are all like amazing.
Yes. Like, we should be more. We should really. We gotta eat. Like,
It should be like more of a staple.
So, yeah, let's
right?
represent ourselves. More. So
Hold that thought. One
Cool.
second. All right, so we're back with a nice little refill. Cheers.
cheers to you. Thank you, sir.
So the vainitas. So from that and the dude in Kawa saying, ¿qué es esa vaina?
No, that was actually at Papi's Grill,
Oh, okay.
where they were born, and how we gave it that name, and they would like put us on the map, and I just started exploring more. It gave me like the sandwiches we made were just amazing. Like, I made these amazing Philly cheesesteak sandwiches, like this freaking amazing cheese sauce that got me
Damn.
to the Food Network. So
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
it did.
shit.
So
Tell me what that was like. That's
well, I was like really paying attention to what was going on with food on Instagram, and I started working with one of my favorite foodie pages, Devour Power. They were coming to my spot and they were trying my food, and they were like, "This is amazing. It's very Instagram worthy. It's very attractive," and they really gave me like that social presence, because they shouted me out a few times, and people started just coming to and that's when I discovered, like, wow, like Instagram, like, influencer marketing really works, and I was really like blown away by that, and I was just really like becoming more comfortable with being myself.
True.
And
Which is key.
And I went from like 600 followers to like maybe like 15,000 followers like in a year,
Wow.
and then like in another
And that was just
6
like on the
months.
back of.
That was just me doing like these crazy looking sandwiches and stuff like that. And then once I started at Caoba, when I was at Caoba, I was probably like at around 13,000, and I'm at 32 now. Like, that all happened like in a year and a half.
Yeah.
That growth, the Dominican pizza was like a sensation. Like, people were just like, holy shit, that's so cool. And it took me to do shows in DR. It took me to do shows like different parts of the country. I just came from a trip from Paris, and someone DM'd me like, "Oh my God, I love your food. I live in Paris. Like, I'm a chef at a restaurant. You should come here and have my food." And I was like, "Yo, it was just
Wow.
amazing how Instagram has literally changed my life, and the Dominican pizza has literally changed my life. It's just giving me opportunities to meet a bunch of people like from
Like,
all
connects
over the
people.
world. Yeah, and
It's like the reach is
allowed me
insane.
to travel more and just do more, and yeah, these influencers, they did an event with the New York City Wine and Food Festival in New York, and I was invited to come and do my like famous Philly cheesesteak sandwiches with the cheese sauce. And so that night I was shouted out on the Food Network, and I did the New York City Wine and Food Festival, and which is I have a very interesting story about.
Tell me.
I'm gonna say it at the end
All
to,
right, cool.
to like close it out, just as an example, just so people could take it, with them, So whatever. So I went and so that cheese sauce really like put me on the map as well. So it's been like the vainitas and the cheese sauce and the Dominican pizza and the mac and cheese, and it's just always doing things that just like like appeal to the eye, but it's also very delicious. You know?
And infused also with that Dominican like culture.
Yes, exactly. And just always, trying to just stay true to my roots and stuff. And so, yeah, these dishes have really like changed my life because, I wasn't able to host private dinners in people's homes like I do now, like almost regularly. Before then, like
True.
I was always like the type of person like, oh, have my in-laws in and make them a nice paella or something. And now I'm doing this shit like all the time. Like people call me, I do private dinners for them. I go to their house and they celebrate party, whatever, all types of parties. And, we do groups of 10, 15, 20 people and we just like do like a nice 10-course dinner and just like,
that's awesome.
And we get to know each other and we drink and we have fun. And it's like, I love my life. I love what I do.
And if folks actually want to reach out to you like for that, how do they do that?
I'm in the process of building a website now, just personalized for like Chef Papi and all the things all the services that I do. But no, right now everything is really just like Instagram and DMs, Chef Papi NYC.
It's at Chef Papi NYC?
Yeah, at Chef Papi _ NYC on Instagram. And it's just like really like right now I do apologize beforehand. I have over 100 DMs in my request folder. I
can imagine you just can't keep up with like all the requests. I have
hundreds of DMs. I have hundreds of DMs, and every day I tackle 20, 30, 40, 50 DMs, and then the next day I have another 100 on top of that. Damn. So it's like
it's hard to keep up.
It's hard to manage, but yeah, right now I do have my email on my bio, so
okay.
And I also work with an agency called Urban Latin Media. I have their contact information on my bio as well, and you can book me through them. They help me book events because it's too much to handle for me.
Gotcha. So they handle like all the logistics?
Yeah, so they keep a calendar for me, and then we do really cool events with them as well. They represent a lot of really cool people. I love them. Check them out. They have a lot of cool services, everything from like, design to logos to merch to everything. They do it
sweet.
all. They're like all one-stop shop. Yeah. So yeah, it's just like going through the process has put me in situations where I've met people who have just given me a little push or given me a little reassurance as to that, like, what I'm actually doing is the right thing,
Yeah.
And, so
it's encouraging, validating.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm sure you network, it opens doors, you meet other people,
100%.
And it provides opportunities. That's amazing.
So I'll tell you my story about my first, like, I want to say, like, real event. Like, I've had tons of events and tons of catering and weddings and you name it before this day. But, I'm like, holy shit, this is the Food Network. This is New York City Wine and Food Festival. Like, this is Fifth Avenue next to the Louis Vuitton store. Like, like, this is big. Like, I'm a city boy. I love New York City. Like, there's something about the skyline that just, like, it just turns me on. I love New York, bro. Like, New York just drives me.
There's no place like it.
No. So, I had a 3-man team that day.
But how'd you get there? Real quick, like I like that to get the Devour. What was it? Devour Power.
There were these influencers foodie influencers on Instagram.
So they were going to the store.
They had an event. They had a New York City Wine and Food Festival event, and with the guy with that show, Man vs. Food. And they invited me to be one of the featured chefs there, and I was fucking blown away by that.
And that just came from you doing the Philly cheesesteaks at the store.
Yeah, just nice. Like they just enjoyed my food. They're like, "Yo, you need to be there," and I'm so grateful for them and for that opportunity. And so this show, that day, the show started like at probably like 8 p.m. I had to be there by like 6:37 to set up. I worked that day at Caoba. I opened lunch.
Damn.
I left early, but I opened lunch and like I was cutting it really close. I was playing with fire and I was trying to like do all my orders and also like prep a few things that I needed for the show for that day. I should have taken the day off, but
yeah, I was about to say that.
Failed at that, yeah. So I'm running super late and my team is running later than I am. So we were a 3-man team, and I was the one that was gonna get there first. And I was in my van with all the equipment and all the food and all the prepped food. And this was the second time that I met Chef Kelvin. The second time. This is the second time, mind you. This guy, I've like looked up to him and worshipped him for the shit he does and his charisma and everything for like a long time before I even thought about being on Instagram. And this is the second time I met him. He calls me and he's like, "Yo, Chef, what's up, man? I'm here. I you know, because I had invited him to the show. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna do the New York City Wine Foods. You should drop by." And he was like, he calls me and he's like, "Dude, I'm here." And I'm like stuck on the Midtown Tunnel or something, like stupid traffic.
Damn.
And I'm like running like an hour late. Yeah, of the real Dominican. And I'm running super late, and I'm just like, dude, I'm really nervous. I'm running really late. My team is running even more behind than I am. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm just gonna even bring this shit in. Like this is Fifth Avenue. Like this is like it was at the Tommy Hilfiger store on Fifth Avenue.
Damn.
So like there's no standing zone. Like I'm just like I'm just like completely like at this point like I'm just shitting my pants. Like I don't know what's going on. I changed in the car that day. Like I was literally like in traffic
while
changing my pants. Yeah, while I was in traffic. And he's like, "Chef, don't worry about it. Look, I'm having a drink across the street. Call me when you're 5 minutes away." I called him when I was 5 minutes away. He's like, "No worries, Chef. We're here. We're out in front waiting for you." I said, "Who?" I said, "What?" I'm confused. I pull up in front of the store. This guy's outside with like 30 people, like 30 volunteers, that like people who are like running the show, like running the actual show, people who are actually
that part of the event,
doing shit. And he like pulled them from their tasks, and they're like, "Yo, one of our chefs is here," and he's like, "Yeah,
needs our help."
Dude, he had literally, I pulled up in front of the store, and he had enough people outside to take everything I had in my van. My van was completely loaded inside to my spot. And he's like, "Chef, relax, breathe, take it easy. This is your apron. This is your package. This is where you're going to be." Like he had like checked in for me.
Wow.
He's like, "Give me your keys. I'm going to go park your car."
That is
This is the second time I met him. The first time I met him, he came to Caoba to try the pizza. The second time I met him, he's at one of my most important shows ever. Like at the very, very beginning of my career.
That's insane, man.
Saying,
that's
dude,
so dope.
Dude, just go relax. I'm going to park your car. He goes, he parks my car. He comes back, and we had a power issue. We couldn't get started, and he was like fucking busting people around, like, "Yo, we have a power issue. Like, what's going on? Like, this show's about to start. Like, we're not ready to." Like, I mean, he moved us around. Like, he held us down.
He like made it happen.
My team finally showed up, and we had like a line over 100 people the entire night. And we got shouted out on the Food Network that day. They posted us saying like we were the main attraction at the New York City Food.
Wow.
And it was all thanks to him, because he was literally like at the foot of our table. I was so busy just making sandwiches, bro, and making the cheese sauce, and people were just surrounding us, taking pictures of the cheese pull. And I couldn't like even talk to people, like, and he was just the whole time like, "Yeah, this is my man Steven, whatever, boo boo, Chef Papi, what, Caoba, blah blah." Like he was just like really like he was like
championed your cause. That's insane, yo. Shout out to Chef Kelvin, yo.
No fucking reason to do that. No fucking reason to do that. And excuse me, I curse a lot.
No, I'm the same way.
That you know that said, like, dude, that was another event in my life that I will never forget, because I'm just like, this dude had no reason to do that. Like
no rhyme or reason.
He has such a busy schedule. He had no reason to be there to help me out. It was my fault I was late. You know what I'm saying? It was my fault, like, my team was late.
Yeah.
It was my I see it that way. Anything that has my name on it, it goes wrong, even if it was like it wasn't me that, you know what I'm saying?
You're going to hold yourself responsible. Yeah.
I hold myself accountable for anything that has my name tied to it. So you know, to me, I'm like, you know, this is the second time I met the dude. And it just said...
And he's going so above and beyond.
Says so much about, like, just like, you know... what are we really doing? You know what I'm saying? What are our goals? And what are we doing to like help other people? Like, there's a lot of people that believe in that. Like, if you just always do wealth, but to to other people, someone will always have your
Comes
back.
back to you.
You know what I'm saying? Someone will always have your back, because essentially that's what life is for. Like, and right now is like I live my life for my family. Like, yes, I enjoy what I do, but like everything that I do, I think about like how is this gonna benefit my kid? How is my kid gonna learn from this? How is he gonna grow up with? And I guess like I'm being a little selfish. Like, I'm trying to set up a little shortcut for them. Like, as to like, no, you don't have to find out the hardest way ever, but this is what I went through, and just like
learn from my mistakes.
Exactly. I just feel like just sharing stories and experiences like this, that's why I love that you do this podcast, because you're sharing other people's stories with everyone that listens to the podcast.
Absolutely.
And that's an amazing thing, because stories are reassuring, and processes are reassuring, and experiences are reassuring, and that's all we really need. We need a little reassurance. We just need to build a little confidence to get over whatever it is that we're dealing with, whatever shit we grew up with, whatever
insecurities we have.
Fulanito did to us or said to us. Like, dude, that it's like we can't keep using this as an excuse to not, get into action.
To not move forward, not follow our dreams.
Let's move, yo.
Absolutely.
Let's just move,
Damn, that's such a dope story, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you, man. And shout out to Chef Kelvin.
Absolutely, man.
I'm not riding your dick at all.
Folks, check out that episode. I'll actually link to it in the episode notes that Chef Kelvin was on. I think I spoke about it in a previous podcast, if I'm not mistaken, but just in case I didn't, it was on the Earn Your Leisure podcast, and it was a dope episode, and you guys should definitely check it out. And Chef Papi, I appreciate you, man. Thank you very much for doing this.
Man. This was a lot of fun.
If you want to, one last thing that which I think you touched on already, but that I want to ask you is if you have like any advice or words of encouragement, I guess, for like an upcoming chef or cook or anything like that, if you want to share it. Which honestly I feel like this entire podcast has been. You know what I mean? Like, people just knowing your story is that. But any last words?
No, I mean, it doesn't necessarily just have to be a chef. I just want just everyone in general. Like, just let go. That's it. It's like the only way you can truly be happy, discover, that gut feeling that you're feeling, whether it's like the right thing for you or not, is to exercise it. It's just like let go. There's something that you're tied to that's not allowing you to let go. To move forward. Let go of that shit. Like, and you know what it is. No one can help you. No one can do the work for you. You can have, like, how many books don't exist? How many podcasts don't exist? Like, there's just all the information is there. It's right in front of you. The formula is given to you, literally. But you gotta do the work.
True.
And it's like, whatever it is that's holding you back from doing the work, figure out what that is, and let go of that. And be prepared. Like, the world is not perfect. Be prepared to be completely fucking ruined.
Take your losses, take your lumps.
Or at least be prepared to know that people just want to shit on you just because they have their own insecurities that they haven't like let go of,
and they're projecting it onto you.
Yes, yeah, dude. The best things that I do are because I was yelled at. I was scared into fucking making it right. I was embarrassed into making it right. I was hurt into making it right. You know, and that's all part of the process. And you don't get that. You don't get that in a book. You could get that in a story. You could hear my story all you want. It's never gonna do anything for you until you start making your own story.
Absolutely. Well said, Chef.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Appreciate you.
Pleasure.
And that's the interview, folks. What you guys think? I hope you guys had as good a time listening to it as we did recording it. And tell me, how dope was that Chef Kelvin story? My first impression when hearing it was that it was an example of a good dude paying it forward. Like someone in his life or career probably lended a helping hand to him in a time of need, and this was his way of paying that back. I don't know if that's true. Obviously, that was just like the impression that I got initially when hearing the story. And it's just so dope that somebody would go out of the way to do something like that for someone that is relatively unknown to them at that point. So shout out to Chef Kelvin for real. And I'll link to the episode of the Earn Your Leisure podcast that I mentioned during the episode that I saw Chef Kelvin on. It's a really good episode. And shout out to Rashad and Troy, which are the hosts of the Earn Your Leisure podcast, which is a dope show that you guys should check out. It's a business podcast, and they usually interview entrepreneurs like Chef Kelvin or real estate investors and folks from different businesses as well. So definitely check them out. And I'll leave you guys with this. Something else that that story reminded me of is a concept that I first learned of through Elliot Hulse. And it's a concept of there being 3 different types of people in the world. It's something that resonated with me to the point that I have it in the acknowledgement section broken down in both of my books. And the gist of it is that every person that you encounter in life will fall into one of these 3 categories. There are people that are mirrors, and those are folks that will show you a reflection of yourself, whether it be positive or negative. So they'll reflect things back to you, which are traits that if you look inward, you realize are within you. And then you do what you will with that information, whether you decide to work on those negatives to get rid of them or work on those positives to increase those positive attributes. So that type of person in your life is a mirror. Then you have the second type of person, which is a crystal ball. And these are people that are in your life, and through them, you can see what you could become. And again, it could be positive or negative. For example, there's a saying in DR that says, El que anda con cojo al año cojea. And if you apply that to the people around you, this crystal ball concept, you can hone in on the folks in your life that are negative and bring you down, and that you'll ultimately become by continuing to surround yourself with them. And conversely, hone in on the folks that are positive influences in your life and bring out the best in you and are motivating and keep it pushing, and you will do the same. Now, nobody's perfect, obviously, and most of us probably have a combination of both of these different types of folks, positive and negative, in our lives. But hopefully you can use that crystal ball concept to help navigate those relationships wisely. And lastly, the last type of person in this concept of 3 different types of people in the world that the story that Chef Papi shared about Chef Kelvin reminded me of are angels. And these are folks that come into your life for an undetermined amount of time, whether it's like a long-term relationship or just a fleeting conversation that you have in passing with someone that happens to give you some like dope direction or advice. But in the time that these angels are in your life, they do something incredible for you. And that could be anything from being your doctor and putting you on a medication that saves your life, or someone that gives you the green light at a job interview that changes the trajectory of your life, or it could be a spouse, a sibling, or as I think was the case here, an angel can be someone that literally shows up to a pivotal event in your life, hands you your apron, parks your van, and champions your cause for the evening. And that's why I thought that was an amazing story and one of my favorite takeaways from this episode. Chef Papi, I want to say thank you once again for doing this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and you have an open invitation to the podcast. We definitely have to run it back again sometime in the future. And thanks again to Stephen and Elaine for hosting us at Aura. and thank you folks for listening to episode 146 of the podcast. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying the Spun Today podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few ways you can help support the show. You can support the Spun Today podcast financially by going to spuntoday.com/support. There you will find a couple different ways that you can do just that, some of which will actually not even cost you a dime, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. When you go to spuntoday.com/support, you'll see my affiliate link to Amazon. Click on it and it will take you to Amazon's website, where you can do your shopping like normal. This will not cost you anything extra, but Amazon will pay me for driving traffic to their website. If you'd like to support the podcast more directly, you can do so by becoming a patron at spuntoday.com/support. You'll also find my Patreon link. This is where creators such as myself can be paid directly by patrons like you. You can either make a one-time donation or schedule recurring donations if you so choose. There are also different tiers of support, and depending on which you decide to go with, you'll also receive some perks in return, such as early access to content, free digital copies of my books, free bookmarks, etc. That is, again, by supporting via my Patreon link, available at spuntoday.com/support. Similar to Patreon, at that same location, you'll also find my Ko-fi link as well as my Buy Me a Coffee link. They work very similar to Patreon and are different ways that you can help support the show financially. And last but certainly not least, you have the good old-fashioned PayPal donation button. Any which way that you choose to support is greatly appreciated. It all helps me do more of what I love, which is writing and podcasting. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support. You can also support the Spun Today podcast by rating and reviewing the show wherever it is that you're listening to this episode. I'd really appreciate it because it really does help. Also, follow me on all socials. At Spun Today on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Spun Today on Instagram, and at Spun Today on YouTube, where you'll not only find full-length episodes of the podcast, but also chopped up clips and additional content. And of course, you can follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Another way you can help support the Spun Today podcast and also upgrade that stale wardrobe of yours is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the banner for Stitch Fix. Once you do, you'll enjoy a $25 discount to your first purchase. And the way Stitch Fix works is pretty cool. I use it and I've never been disappointed. You'll set up a profile. You'll put in all the sizes for your clothes, as well as all the different brands and types of clothes that you like to wear. It's really simple and intuitive to set up. They'll show you pictures and pretty much give you a thumbs up or thumbs down option on if you would wear something or not. And you get to select all the brands that you already are used to wearing. With this information, there are thousands of passionate, trend-setting stylists will curate a Stitch Fix box for you. They'll send you 5 items that you get to preview before they mail it to you, and you'll get to select based on the image if you like it or not. If not, they'll replace it with something else, and if so, they'll mail it to you absolutely for free. You can try everything on, and you have a few days to send everything back or keep the stuff that you want to keep. Then you can use that $25 credit that I mentioned towards your purchase of those items. Again, to freshen up your wardrobe and also support the Spun Today podcast, go to spuntoday.com/support and click on my affiliate link banner for Stitch Fix and enjoy your $25 credit. Do you want to start your own podcast? Have a great show idea that you want to get out into the masses but don't know quite how to get it from your head out into the world? Well, here's how. Use the podcast host Libsyn. That's who I use to bring the Spun Today podcast to you. And now you can use them the same way. Using the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, you can open up your Libsyn account today and get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Here's how it works. Once you record your show, you upload it to your Libsyn account, where you can fill in your episode notes, upload your podcast art, and schedule when you want your episodes to release. Once you do that, Libsyn will take care of the rest. They'll distribute your show to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcatchers that you choose, instantaneously and seamlessly. Again, go to libsyn.com and use the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, to get 2 months free. Or use the affiliate link that's in the episode notes. Again, that's libsyn.com, promo code SPUN. take that great podcast idea from out of your head and put it out into the world. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.